In-class application 5 gives us a stock that has an initial price of $76 per share. We get a dividend during the year, and we get ending share price of $84. We want the total return, the dividend yield, and the capital gains yield. All right, let's make a little... All right, the first thing that a lot of people ask me is just, I don't know where to start. And my answer to you is, if you're not sure where to start, draw a timeline and then go from there. So we bought the stock for $76. We got a dividend of $1.95, and we sold it for $84. And the question is, like, what's the total return here? Let's write it out here. Total return, capital gains yield, and the dividend yield. All right, there are a lot of different ways to do this, but first let's talk about what each of these are. Total return. Just look at the word. The two words together says we want to know what our return would have been if we made this investment and did these things. The capital gains yield. Well, the capital gain, in fact, let me move this. And let me just make this, because we're going to change a little bit about the way we do this. The capital gains is going to be how much you gain on the capital itself. So it'll involve these two numbers. And then the dividend yield will just be the dividend divided by what we paid for it. So let's do both the capital gains yield and the dividend yield. The capital gain, let me just go out here. The capital gain is going to be 84 minus 76. So we're going to make $8. And I will put all of these in dollar format just so you can feel comfortable with that. The capital gains yield. So usually when you see yield, you're going to take some number and divide it by another number. And in this case, and in most cases, it's going to be the price that you paid for it. And so the assumption is always that at time 0, you buy a stock or a bond for a certain amount. At time 1, you sell it at a certain amount, unless it's specified otherwise. It's almost always time 1. And usually the assumption is that you get the dividend paid at date 1. It doesn't always have to be that way. Like let's say that you buy a stock and then 6 months later you get a dividend. If you wanted to be really correct, you would have to get the 6-month rate and discount it back. But this is sort of a back-of-the-envelope calculation that is done quite often in financial fields that doesn't involve like time value of money on a return that's less than a year. So anyway, capital gains yield is just going to be the capital gain divided by the price. If we did that for the capital gain, we just took the $8 divided by the 76, then the dividend is probably the same thing, right? $1.95 divided by 76. Let's put that in percent terms. Boom. All right, the total return. Well, that's got to be both of those added up. 13%. So let's check our answers. 13.09, 2.57, and 10.53. And that's exactly what we have here. If you were really stumped, let me insert a couple lines. If you were really stumped, one way to do this might be to take the sum of the cash flows So this is almost like a present value calculation, and in fact we can do that. So we can make some guess about what R is. Let's say it's 10%. And let me add a couple decimal places. And we can say that this is that divided by 1 plus that to the power of time. Notice that whoops, I need to lock it. And we also need to make, for this to work, we need to make this a negative. Okay, so let me explain what we did here. And again, you don't have to do it this way. You can totally do it this way. It'll 100% work. But if you wanted to get the total return, you could do it this way just to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Okay, so we paid $76. We got the $85.95. The present value of that is $78.14. So if we use GoalSeek and we set C11 to 0 by changing R, we get exactly the same answer. And the reason that we do is because this implies a discount rate of 13.09%. So when we solve for the IRR and set it equal to 0, we end up with a 13.09%, and that's kind of our return on buying the stock. Well, it is our return on buying the stock. And so if you're not sure that you've gotten this correct, you can add the capital gains yield and the dividend yield if you'd like. But another way to do it is just solve for the IRR by assuming that you paid a negative amount of money out, and then you get a positive at the end, and the NPV is 0 will give you the total return. This is probably the easier way to do it. I would only use this to check yourself, but it's another way of visualizing the cash flows.